bothered. But there, lying underneath the bushes, is the entire Nkuhuma pride and our injured lioness. So for those of you who are a bit squeamish, it's probably a good thing to look away now, as you'll see her hip is not in good condition at all. It is fairly mangled, unfortunately, so there is a bit of a wound, saying likely that there is serious damage to that left hip. Now, the thing is that she is walking fine. I spoke to the guys that saw her walking this morning. Apparently she's walking just fine, so it looks worse than it actually is. It's just that her skin has peeled off basically from the muscle, and that's why it looks really, really nasty, and it looks a lot worse than it probably actually is. And I'm sure she will recover from it. As long as she's able to get food and water, she'll be fine. But it is a nasty wound. How she got it, no idea. They went into the Kruger National Park. They were absolutely fine, all 5 of them. They went into the Kruger and they came back, and she had that wound. Not one of the other lionesses is sporting a wound at all, so I really don't know what happened to her. She's one of the mothers of the original cubs, so she's not the mother of the new cubs, but I don't know what's happened to her and what's caused that. There's no other scratch on her, there's no bite marks on her rest of her body, so I really, really well and truly don't know what could have caused that. But either way, it must be seriously uncomfortable in heat like this with the amounts of flies that are around. She must be driven absolutely mad. You can see she's actually not even going to lie on that hip at all. She'll probably just lie the way she is for the next few weeks while that starts to dry and to heal up a little bit, and only once it's actually healed a bit will she start to lie on that left side again. The good news is that the female with the cubs is here. She's lying just to the left there, so that female there, she is very thin at the moment, but you can see she still does have milk and has still got suckle marks, so that's quite a good sign that those cubs are still alive. And it's not unusual to see lionesses that are a little bit on the skinnier side when they've got cubs, particularly if she's the only lioness in the pride that's got them, because she's having to spend a lot of time away from the pride, tracking back and forth, trying to feed them. The cubs are absorbing a lot of nutrients from her, and she's spending a lot of time on her own, which means she's not going to be feeding as well as everybody else, and that means she's going to be a little bit on the skinnier side, but nothing to worry about. She's still absolutely fine, and like I say, the good thing is that there's still milk there, so it means she is producing, and hopefully the cubs are fine. Mooks, you're worried about an infection on this lioness. Well, it is a possibility that they could get it, but you'll be surprised how resilient these animals are. She'll groom that all the time. She's going to lick it, she's going to clean it. She might get a little bit of infection, but as long as she's getting food and water, her body should be able to overcome it. It's a nasty wound for sure, but I have seen worse on lions, and I've seen them come back from worse. So it's just going to look really bad for a while, but once it's kind of dried up a little bit and that skin starts to heal and starts to scar, you'll find that it's not going to be as bad, and she should make a full recovery. I was alluding to the fact this morning about Mfumo's face, when he had that massive hole in his face and everybody thought that he was going to die and that this is the end of him. But you will be surprised just how strong these animals are, and you might be wondering why we haven't interfered and tried to dart this Nkuhuma female and treat that wound. Well, the simple fact of the matter is that it's been caused by nature. So if she were not to survive, unfortunately, I know it's a hard stance to take, but unfortunately when these animals are injured in nature, sometimes it's nature's way of just getting rid of a bloodline that is slightly weaker than others, and you do see it happening. And imagine how many impalas and wildebeest and zebras and varying other animals have walked around here with similar wounds that have not even been looked at twice because they are not a lioness. So it's just a blanket rule that we use, and it means that there's no black and white or grey. There's no grey area. It's just black and white. Is that if an animal is affected by us as people, we will try and fix it. But if it isn't affected by an animal, then, well, these animals have to try and sort of come right, or the nutrients that they would provide will then go back into the soil. I know it's a really horrible way to think about things, and especially when it's lionesses or leopards that we see daily and we get to know really well, but in this situation here, like I say, it looks a lot worse than it actually is. It's more a flesh wound and a skin wound than it is a deep sort of laceration or any sort of breakage of the bone. And the fact that she's moving absolutely fine and walking without a limp means that she's actually not sustained too much damage. It'll be a bit tender, that's for sure, and it'll look quite nasty, but that should come right. It's just going to be a bit of a mission to keep clean and to make sure that she doesn't get too much of an infection. What we actually need is those flies to land there and for maggots to start cleaning it out, because maggots, even though it looks really bad, are actually not the worst thing. Remember, Mfumo's face had a few maggots in them, and that helped just clean the wound and get that nice healthy skin and eventually it will all stitch together, but it will take some time for her to come right. I still just can't work out what's actually happened to her. I mean, it must have been maybe a male or another female grabbed her by the rump there and pulled, and that ripped the skin. But it's really an odd wound because she's got not one other mark on her, so there's no cuts around her face or her front legs or bite marks on her back, which would be typical of a fight. So how she's gotten that, I don't really know, and it's not typical of a hunting injury. David, do you think buffalo? Well, that's what I was just about to say, that buffalo don't cause injuries like that. It's very seldom that you'd find a buffalo causing a almost scrape injury that this is. That, you know, buffaloes generally you'll find a horn injury or a broken leg from an impact. Is very seldom that you'll see a sort of ripping wound like that without a hole somewhere there. There's no evidence of a hole where a horn could have gone in to break that skin like that. So I'm not sure. My suggestion, or my guess, would be more another predator, or particularly a lion. Maybe hyenas. It's also possible. I've seen quite a few lionesses with bad injuries to their tail from hyenas, because hyenas will try to go around the back and nip and bite around the tail area. In fact, the Salala lions, we know that there's been 2 different females that lost their tails due to hyenas, and the one female that we have that's currently alive from the Salalas that lost her tail, she had extensive bite wounds around that tail. It was actually because I saw her about 2-3 days after it happened, and the tail itself was completely stripped of meat. There was actually a piece of bone that eventually fell off, and then there was these kind of similar wounds all around her back legs and feet and on her bum area. So it's a similar wound to what you'd see from hyenas, but far more restful and far more sort of content are the rest of the pride that are all sitting around in the quarry thickets. The cubs all look fairly good. So they're not full, but they're all looking healthy and happy, which is great news. Now, Faisal, you reckon that maybe a territorial fight? Well, that's what I would lean towards. You know, they went way out of their territory. Why they went there, I'm not quite sure at all, because they went right down towards Nkoro, and then from Nkoro crossed into the Kruger National Park, which is in a very different area than the Nkuhumas have been in a very long time. So maybe they bumped into the Torchwood Pride. They could have bumped into other male lions there that they don't know. They could have bumped into other females. You know, there are females around Hamilton's, Hoya Hoya, that area. So it's very possible that they bumped into some other predator, particularly lions, and had a bit of a territorial dispute, and that's what has happened. The thing about a territorial dispute, and particularly with lions, is that there's no ways the rest of the pride would have just dropped and ran and left this female all to herself. They would never have just said, you know, we're not going to defend her, and you would have found some of the others having injuries if they got into a really big fight. The only way that this could have happened is that she was separated from the rest of the pride, and then this happened. But I would imagine then she would have sported a lot more bite wounds from other lions. I think this is more likely hyenas' work than anything else, but it's all speculation. It's really difficult to know without actually being there and seeing what's happening. And also the way she's lying at the moment, I can't see what the top of the wound looks like and whether there's a mark on the top where you could actually see a hole or a bite or something like that. So maybe when she stands up a bit later, because we will spend time with the Nkuhuma Pride, and I'm sure they're going to head down to Buffelshoek Dam for a drink this evening, and maybe when she does that, then we'll be able to see whether there's actually marks of canines or any sort of sign of teeth that are around that wound, or what could have potentially caused it. But like I say, as much as it looks nasty and as much as it probably hurts her, she will come right from this. I really don't think it's as bad as it looks. Sometimes these wounds look worse than they really are, and that's, I suppose, easy for us to say when we don't have a massive chunk missing out of our backside. But she seems to be okay. She's, like I say, the fact that she's moving and the fact that she's walking without a limp is generally a good indication that there's no real physical damage to bone or ligament structure, and it's just a muscular skin structure, and that will eventually grow back. As long as she keeps it clean and is well fed and well hydrated, then she should be okay. And the rest of her body condition is good. You know, although this only happened 3-4 days ago, because that's when they went into the Kruger, the rest of her looks absolutely fine. She's not showing any sort of signs of discomfort besides that nasty gash on her bum. So I think she wants to roll over, but it's probably a little bit painful to lie on still. It's still a bit too fresh to actually be putting too much weight on. It's like when you ever have a burn or friction wound, so if you fall over on like tar or asphalt or something like that, you know, the skin is very sensitive to the touch for a few days, and so I'm sure that's the same with this. And only once it starts to stitch and heal a little bit or she'll be able to roll over onto that other side, so she'll probably be a bit uncomfortable for the next little bit, and this heat really can't be helping. It must be a little unpleasant when it comes to heat. As you can see, the rest of the pride is completely at home in this quarry bush. They found themselves the smallest bit of shade possible. I don't know why they're not lying further down, because down in the drainage is a beautiful sandy cool area, and maybe during the middle of the day there was no shade there, but now it would be the perfect place for lions to lie. The bank is making this nice long shadow and the sand's quite moist there, so I would imagine it would be a lot cooler and a lot more comfortable for these lions down there than it is where we are now. Sinak, you're wondering what weather lions can withstand. Well, lions are fairly widespread. If you think about it, there are lions in the desert areas where temperatures can really soar into the high 120s Fahrenheit or close to 50 degrees Celsius, in fact more in the sun in those desert sections. And then if you go into the very same deserts, in the winter months it can often drop below freeze, and the lions are able to survive there. So it is possible that they can. Oh, is it a bit stiff, my girl? Shame. You can see the way she's rolling. It's a little on the stiff side. And there's no other wounds I can see on her left flank, is there? No, nothing there. But she is a little bit stiff, and you can see she's trying to keep that hip off the ground, so she's just twisted her body a little bit. But she seems fairly content at this stage. She doesn't seem as though she's too bad. Let's see if she rolls all the way over and actually puts some pressure on it. So they can actually withstand quite a lot. And if you think about lions that are in the zoos across the world, there are lions that are in Berlin, for example, where it snows sometimes, and so you'll find a situation where, you know, they can withstand that. But what will happen with lions is that their coats will change a little bit. So if they're in a place like Berlin, let's say, and they're in a zoo there, their lions will get big and fluffy, and their coats become thick, and so that they insulate better. Whereas here in Africa, you'll find that they'll have a very fine coat, and even here in the winter and summer, the coat will change slightly. It will thicken a little bit during the winter months and then thin out as we get into these hotter summer temperatures like we have now. You can see they're not too bad though, because none of them are fully panting. If it was really excessively hot and they'd eaten a lot, you would have found that their breathing rate would be super quick. Their mouths would be open as they use the evaporation and the moisture on the tongue that would evaporate when panting to cool that blood on the tongue and mouth and send the cooler blood back into the body. But in this case, they found some shade and a bit of a breeze, and they seem to be okay. So that's fairly good, and I'm surprised actually, because I thought they would have been a lot hotter than what they are. But just in terms of numbers with the Nkuhuma pride, especially if there's a wound on one of them, it's always good just to check how many are here. But all 5 females are here, and I counted 5 cubs at least, and I think there's the 6th one is further on where I can't see. So it looks like all the pride is here. There's no sign of any males, so I think the Birminghams are not here at the moment. There's probably 1 Birmingham that's in Buffelshoek that we know of, close to where Mvula was this morning, and then 2 in Torchwood. I don't, like I say, know where the 4th one is, but no sign of any of the Birminghams here with these lionesses at the moment. But it's all very sedate at this stage. I was kind of hoping that we'd come to Buffelshoek Dam and there'd be some elephants around and we'd be able to spend some time with the ellies and wait for our lions to wake up, because I think they're going to be seriously sleepy until sun starts to set. It's going to be one of those days where it's going to take them a while. The thing is, though, is that they're very skinny, and that means that they will be on the move tonight and they will be looking for food. I doubt that they're going to sit around too long. I'm sure they're going to make use of the nighttime conditions, and particularly because we've just come from a full moon period, and we know that full moon periods, it's a lot more difficult for our cats to hunt, and so now they'll try and utilize that moon still down in the early hours of the evening, because remember, the moonrise will be around sort of midnight at the moment, just after midnight, and it will still be quite bright, and so they'll try and use the sort of first part of the night when it's dark. There's a bit of a wind. Today's been hot, which means that a lot of the daylight animals have really kind of been battered by the sun and will be a little lethargic tonight, which will be perfect for the lions to then try and take advantage. But I'm sure, like I say, that they'll go for a drink before they're going to do anything else. So we'll be patient and wait and just see and hope they're going to go down to drink, because it will be beautiful if they do. But talking about patience and luck, it seems Jamie has managed to find her serval again and must be beaming at the thought of this sighting.